Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's shir. Excuse the croaky voice. Tonight is the last of the 4 shiurim we've had on this topic of praying with fire, Yisrael and Yishmael. We didn't quite finish off last week, so it's entitled More Effective Strategies for Tefilla. Really what we did in this sort of mini-series of Yisrael and Yishmael, we focused on the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer that we started with, that the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says that there are 2 names of the 70 nations which contain the Shem Hashem. One is Yishmael, one is Yisrael, and it's alluding to the Koach Tefilla. So we thought it was appropriate to focus on the Koach Tefilla, and in the first couple of shiurim we focused on the power of Tefilla, how powerful it is, and then we focused on why Tefillah is so difficult, and in the last year and hopefully tonight we'll focus on strategies for effective Tefillah. So what we've discussed so far, a few strategies we mentioned last week, and again I say this, I feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about Tefillah when I am very, very far from anything close to effective Tefillah and being someone who can present myself as someone who davens well. But this is just sort of open forum conversation to discuss some ideas, and the ideas we've mentioned last week were, number 1, to remove distractions, switching the phone off, etc., etc. Then we discussed Mokum Kavua, the importance of having a fixed place to daven. The Gemara in Bracha says, Elokei Avram Be'ezrei, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to the person who fixes his place for tefillah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to his assistance, and the Meiri says there's nothing mystical about it. It's a help to a person's concentration, whether it's at home, whether it's in shul, the place in shul. It just aids kavana. And then we focus on tefillah b'tzibur. The Rambam mentions that Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu moes b'tfiloson shel rabim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not reject the tefillah of those who daven b'rabim, the keach of tefillah b'tzibur. And then we also mentioned about focusing on words that are relevant and that resonate in today's times. Sadly, there are many which resonate, and I picked out some from Shemona Esra. Soimech Neiflim, Refi Cholim, Matzir Asurim, Riva Riveinu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should fight, our fight, as it were. Sim Shalom Tova. Bracha, Chen, V'Chesed, V'Rachamim Aleinu, V'Kol Yisrael Amecha. These are all very relevant and very powerful words. We also discussed the concept of learning about Tefillah. The more you learn about Tefillah, that also helps our kavana. We discussed developing concentration slowly, that a person can't just wake up in the morning and decide to run the marathon. You've got to train, focus on a certain sentence, a certain pasuk, a bracha, in Shemona Esra, whatever it may be. And then lastly, last week we discussed how important it is to make Tefillah very personal, to talk to the Rabbi. It doesn't have to be 3 times a day, Shachris, Mincha, Mariv. It can be on any situation. I mentioned the story of Rabbi Brizak in Yerushalayim, on Rosh Hashanah, etc. That's where we got up to. Now, I'm just going to finish off by mentioning 2 ideas. Again, simple ideas, but they resonate with me, and I just really want to share it with you. One is a bracha, which is I think, sometimes not fully appreciated, and it's the bracha of Asher Yotza. It's a bracha we say several times a day, and it's a very beautiful tefillah, and it's an opportunity to say thank you to the Rabbi Shalom. We had I think years ago, we focused on the halacha part of the shiurim, the halachas of Asher Yotza, when you say it, how often you say it, and all the related halachas. Maybe we can revisit that at some point. But I just really wanted to mention this in light of an email. It's a well-known email. I just think it sort of contains a lot of the hashkafa of Asher Yotza, and it's a powerful email which I think brings the point out that if this can be one thing that we take away from the shir, to have better kavanah for Asher Yotza, then the whole thing is kedai. This is an article written by someone called Kenneth Prager. He's a doctor in America, and this is what he writes. When I was an elementary school student in yeshiva, my classmates and I used to find amusing a sign that was posted just outside the bathroom. It was an ancient Jewish blessing, commonly referred to as the Asher Yotza benediction, that was supposed to be recited after one relieved oneself. For grade school children, there could be nothing more strange or ridiculous than to link to acts of magduration and defecation with holy words that mention God's name. Blessings were reserved for prayers, for holy days, or for thanking God for food, or for some act of deliverance, but surely not for an act of bodily function that evoked smirks and giggles. It took me several decades to realize the wisdom that lay behind the bracha that was composed by Abaya, a 4th century Babylonian rabbi. Abaya's blessing is contained in the Gemara, an encyclopedic work of Jewish law and law that was written over the first 5 centuries of the Common Era. The Jewish religion is chock full of brachas, of blessings, or brachas as they're called in Hebrew. In fact, an entire tractate of Gemara is devoted to brachas. On Daf 60b, Samach Amud Beis, and he quotes the whole text, Asher Yotzes Adam B'Chacham Avar V'Nekav, we're familiar with it. An observant Jew is supposed to recite the bracha in Hebrew after each visit to the bathroom. We young yeshiva students were reminded of our obligation to recite this prayer by the signs that contained its text that were posted just outside the restroom doors. It is one thing, however, to post these signs, and it is quite another to realistically expect pre-adolescents to have the maturity to realize the wisdom and need for reciting a 1600-year-old blessing related to bodily functions. It was not until my 2nd year of medical school that I first began to understand the appropriateness of this short prayer. Pathophysiology brought home to me the terrible consequences of even minor aberrations in the structure and function of the human body. At the very least, I began to no longer take for granted the normalcy of my trips to the bathroom. Instead, I started to realize how many things had to operate just right for these minor interruptions of my daily routine to run smoothly. I thought of Abaya and his blessing. I recalled my days in yeshiva and remembered how silly that sign outside the bathroom had seemed. But after seeing patients whose lives revolved around their dialysis machines and others with catheters, I realized how wise the rabbis had been. And then it happened. I began to recite Abaya's bracha. At first, I had to go back to my siddur to get the text right. Excuse me. With repetition, and there are many opportunities a day for this, I could recite it fluently and with sincerity and understanding. Over the years, reciting the Asher Yotza has become for me an opportunity to offer thanks not just for the proper functioning of my excretory organs, but for my overall good health. The text, after all, refers to catastrophic consequences of the rupture or obstruction of any bodily structure, not only of those of the urinary or gastrointestinal tract. Could Abaya, for example, have foreseen that blockage of the cavity or lumen of the coronary artery could lead to the commonest cause of death in industrialized countries some 16 centuries later? I have often wondered if other people also yearn for some way to express gratitude for their good health. Physicians especially, who are exposed daily to the ravages that illness can wreak, must sometimes feel the need to express thanks for being well and thus well-being. There was one unforgettable patient whose story reinforced the truth and beauty of the Asher Yotza for me forever. Josh was a 20-year-old student who sustained an unstable fracture of his 3rd and 4th cervical vertebrae in a motor vehicle crash. He nearly died from his injury and required emergency intubation and ventilatory support. He was initially totally quadriplegic, but for weak flexion of his right biceps. A long and difficult period of stabilization and rehabilitation followed. There were promising signs of neurological recovery over the first few months that came suddenly and unexpectedly. Movement of a finger here, flexion of a toe there, return of a sensation here, adduction of a muscle grip there. With incredible courage, hard work, and an excellent physical therapist, Josh improved day by day. In time, and after what seemed like a miracle, he was able to walk slowly with a leg brace and a cane. But Josh continued to require intermittent catheterization. I only know too well the problems and perils the young man would face for the rest of his life because of neurogenic bladder. The urologists were very pessimistic about his chances for not requiring catheterization. They had not seen this occur after a spinal cord injury of this severity. Then the impossible happened. I was there the day Josh no longer required a urinary catheter. I thought of Abaya's Asher Yotza prayer, pointing out that I could not imagine a more meaningful scenario for its recitation. I suggested to Josh, who was a yeshiva graduate, that he say the prayer. He agreed. Concludes Dr. Prager, as he recited the ancient bracha, tears welled up in my eyes because Josh is my son. So, a very beautiful article, but I think it brings home many points, and primarily the importance of an opportunity to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for the safe and healthy functioning of our bodies and our general well-being. Okay, let me just finish off with one unbelievable idea. Another bracha that we say many times is Birchas Hamazon. Birchas Hamazon is sometimes underrated. It's a mitzvah saseh min Torah. If a person eats to satiation, v'ochalta v'sovato v'erachta, it's a mitzvah min Torah to bench. Now let me read to you a Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, and you've got it on the sheet. If you're listening online, email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the Makaris. But this is a Shulchan Aruch in Aruchaim in Siman Kuf Pei Hey. If you need to remember it, it's coffee, Kuf Pei Hey. Sorich, this is halacha base. Sorich sheyashmiya le'ozno mashemotzi besfosov. You can't think benching. You've got to articulate it. You've got to say it. V'im lo yashmiya le'ozno v'yotzo b'vad sheyotzi besfosov. You've got to at least move your lips. There's got to be something. Now, the Be'hetiv says something astonishing. I'll come back to this Be'hetiv in a second, but let me preface it with a story. Many years ago, I forget when I heard it, there was a mashkiach in Eretz Yisrael who was walking in Mesharim, the back streets of Mesharim. It must have been about 10, 15 years ago. And you're familiar with the back streets of Mesharim. Every other house is like a Beis HaMedrash, a Hasidish shtibel, or whatever it may be. And he was walking past, and there was an open window to a Beis HaMedrash. It was lunchtime. And this mashkiach noticed an old Yerushalmi Yid davening, sitting there. He must have finished his lunch. It was Ben Astar, and it was lunchtime. He had finished his sandwiches, the ends of it were sort of on the table, and he was benching with a kavona that he'd never seen before, with a hislavos, with a beautiful kavona. And it made an impression on him. Anyway, he just made sort of a mental note, and he carried on walking. It so happened that a few days later, he happened to be walking exactly the same place, the same time, went past this open window, and he saw exactly the same sight. Again, this Yerushalmi Yid davening, benching, with tremendous kavana. He realized there's something funny going on. There's a story here. So he went in and sat down with this fellow and said, look, I came past a few days ago. I noticed you benching. Halavai, I should have such kavana. What is the background to this Birchas Hamazon? So the fellow said, he was resistant, but in the end he told him the following story. He said, before the war, I was a little boy growing up in a village outside of Lodz. One day the Rebbe came in and said, tomorrow we've got a surprise. Because tomorrow the great Rav Meir Shapiro, the Rosh Hashiva of Chachmei Lublin, the innovator of Daf Yomi, one of the greats of the last century, he's coming to our Cheder. And he is going to speak to us. It's going to be a special day. Everyone has to come in Big Day Shabbos. It's going to be a very special day in Cheder tomorrow. The next day he came. He said, this young man, he said, I was a little bocher. I was sitting at the front. And Rav Meir Shapiro was a great personality, a tremendous orator. And I was sitting there. I was mesmerized. And he asked us all a question. He said, there is one letter in Birchas Hamazon. There's one letter in the Aleph base that does not appear in Birchas Hamazon. What is that letter? Good quiz question. Right? There is one letter which does not appear in Birchas Hamazon. I'll let you out of your misery. The letter is a final fei, an end of fei, the pace of it. Doesn't appear in benching. And he then mentioned this Be'hetiv. Now, the Be'hetiv says the following. There's a letter missing in your handout, but I'll correct it in Mr. Hashem. Motsosi loma ein fei be'Birchas Hamazon. I found out why there is no final fei, end of fei, in Birchas Hamazon. Lefi shekol mi sheberech Birchas Hamazon be'kavona. Anyone who benches Birchas Hamazon with kavona, ein shoylet boi lo'af v'lo ketzef. The letter fei is a bad letter, as it were. It's connected with the words af, anger, ketzef, destruction, and etc. And a person who benches Birchas Hamazon will be sort of safeguarded from these things. And furthermore, if a person benches Birchas Hamazon with kavana, he will have parnasa, berevach, and bekovod, with abundance and with honor, all his days. Quoting from the Sefer HaChinuch. And then he carries on, v'hamedaktik yizohel levorich dafka b'toich ha'seva v'lo bal peh. You should use it from a bencher or siddur and not bal peh. Okay, etc., etc. And then, just one more thing, he then quotes the Sefer Hasidim, who says a crazy, unbelievable thing. There was a story of a person who passed away. He came back to somebody, to one of his relatives in a dream. I'm being punished daily because I didn't say brachas with kavanah. That adds kan the beheter, which, by the way, the Mishnah Berurah quotes. The Chavetz Chaim quotes this in the Mishnah Berurah. Says this Yerushalmi Chassid. That's what Rabbi Shapiro told us. This behetiv, a person who benches brachas hamazon with kavanah will be spared from af and from ketzef, etc. I undertook that I was going to daven, I was going to say brachas hamazon, I was going to bench with kavanah. Fast forward a few years, World War II erupted. I found myself on a cattle car on the way to Auschwitz. All of a sudden I got out, there was tumult, it was crazy, and I found myself on a line. I suddenly realized, I remembered, I had a flashback to Rabbi Meir Shapiro. And I silently offered a tefillah to the Rabbeinu Shalom, and I said, Rabbeinu Shalom, I want to cash in on this. I've been benching with a kavanah for many years. I mean, I'm now a teenager probably. I want to cash in on this behetiv. Before he knew it, he was at the front of the line, and he was directed to the right to life. He found himself on another line a few moments later. He said, Rabbeinu Shalom, I'm cashing in again. I want to cash in on this haftacha. A guy came over to him and whispered in his ear, tell him you work in the kitchens. You're a chef. They'll put you in the kitchens, it's the safest place to be. And sure enough, he told him, I'm a chef, I can cook. He found his way to the kitchens, which he survived the war, and that's why, he said, that's why I always bench b'kavanah. So you see that Birchas Hamazon is a tefillah. The words are beautiful. It's a tefillah. It's a sort of a whiz through Jewish history. It's an opportunity to give thanks for so many things. So another thing to focus on in effective strategies for tefillah is not only Asher Yotza, a prayer for our well-being, for our good health, but also Birchas Hamazon. Birchas Hamazon is a very powerful tefillah. Okay, there's more to say on Yisrael and Yishmael, Emes Hashem. These little shiurim, together with our collective tefillahs and those of Klal Yisrael, should bring Besuras Tovas, Emes Hashem, Lanu L'chol Yisrael. Amen.